By request, I'm doing a video today on distraction. This is a wonderful topic, so thank you, Mrs. Rosario, for requesting this topic. You hear me talk a lot about distraction and about God rebuking me for distracting myself in various videos, and you might think, gosh, when is she going to get over this problem of distraction? But here's the thing. What distraction looks like for me today is far different from what it looked like a year ago. And if we're not on an upward trajectory and we're not getting deeper and deeper and being changed continuously, we are in big trouble. God is bringing us to a place. He is sanctifying us and he is making us holy as he is holy. And this condition that we're in right now in the flesh is going to be a battle until the day that the Lord comes. We're commanded to be circumcised from the sinful flesh and disciplined in our physical flesh. So when we start letting the physical flesh take over the heart and spirit, we're in danger of returning to the sinful flesh, and we're in danger of justifying it. And God is not having that with me. And that's why he disciplines me with the shepherd's rod. That's why he's willing to send me grief through something like watching my dog suffer from something and then striking my body when I'm not listening to the point that my bones are aching and I can't get comfortable, and I'm pleading with him to relent, but he's talking with me on his word, but he's not relenting on those symptoms because he's telling me, you are going to hear my rebuke. And I got to tell you, as much pain as I was in yesterday, because, oh my goodness, I was in so much pain. My head was just killing me and my bones and my muscles were aching. But I heard him talking to me about things that I haven't, I heard him so clearly and fluidly. And sometimes we have to be brought into that position. In the word, it says that Jesus delighted in the fear of the Lord, and it kind of sounds a little weird, right? Like, who delights in fear? And of course, we're not talking about satanic fear that comes from a spirit. We're talking about fear of the Lord, the desire to please him, fear of not being in his favor, fear of him turning against us. And so as painful as some of these things are when he's rebuking us, I know that's going to sound weird, but maybe some of you get it. I delight in the fear of the Lord. I delight knowing that I'm his and knowing that I can see what he's doing to keep me close to him. I can see the ways that he's saving me from myself, from my own desires. I don't know that I'm ever going to be healed from this tendency to distract. I suspect that this is just part of the condition of our flesh right now. That's my understanding. But what I need to understand about the desire to distract is that it's in my physical flesh. And that when I start distracting, I'm stepping out of the heart and spirit, and I'm in danger of returning to the sinful flesh. That's the way that I need to be understanding it. And I'm not necessarily doing it with inherently sinful things. I've mentioned to you that I've done it with even hobbies like cooking or sewing. And then there's some things that I consider to be more dangerous, like going on to YouTube and even, going through the news or documentaries or things like that. Because then I'm occupying myself with something else. I'm occupying myself with somebody else's voice, somebody else's thoughts. And it's not that I can never go on the news to find out, what's going on. But even when I'm doing that, I need to be filled with the Spirit of the Lord. I need to always be occupied by the Spirit of the Lord. And when that happens, I'm even going to interpret what I'm hearing or reading in a totally different way, because he's going to interpret the world for me. I'm going to have his eyes, his ears, and his heart to understand. Now, the request that came from Mrs. Rosario was, once you've dealt with your situation with distraction, do you think you could please share that process? I really feel it will be helpful, especially because you mentioned it's something that has been repeated. I too am dealing with distraction myself. I feel like it would be a common problem. And she's right. It is a common problem because we're all in the flesh. You know, I think it's really interesting. This was one of the things that God was showing me, is that Jesus, there's no indication ever in scripture that Jesus was physically afflicted. Certainly he was persecuted and he was going through that sort of thing, but he was not physically afflicted. And yet we see evidence that the servants of God were physically afflicted. You see that with David, you see that with Paul. But Jesus stayed close to God. He was sinless and blameless. He was not getting pulled away in the flesh to the point where he sinned against God. And I've told you before that that illness really does have to do with that. He is doing something. He's rebuking us. And if he tells us in the word that he doesn't give grief willingly, then why is he giving grief? We have to answer that question. And in every single situation, he has always shown me that he is teaching me something. Contrary to the way we might have looked at this previously, when we start succumbing to the desires of our physical flesh, we are indeed sinning against God, because he tells us that we need to be circumcised from the sinful flesh, disciplined in the physical flesh. And throughout the word, he's telling us and teaching us about matters of the heart. His ministry takes place by his spirit to our spirit and in our heart. That's what he's cleaning up. So although he doesn't necessarily say to live in the heart, he does say by the spirit, and he's inherently describing a process of living in the heart and spirit. There's no way for us to hear him when we're living in our flesh, and so it makes no sense for us to return there and put ourselves in danger of returning to the sinful flesh. And yet, the condition that we're living in right now is constantly trying to pull us there, even in the things that we have to do on a daily basis, like eat, or even interacting with others. And I believe this is another reason why we're supposed to surround ourselves with people who are in agreement, or with whom we are in agreement. Because if we're not, we start to think like them, we start to act like them, we start to want to belong. It's not an easy thing to be circumcised from the sinful flesh and disciplined in the physical flesh. This is also another reason why it's so important, and I believe that this is why God really rebuked me on thinking that no big deal, I'm just going to do this thing real quick and then I'll enter into your Sabbath. I'm just going to can this turkey. No, what's more important? Something that I want to do, something I think I need to do, or something God has commanded me to do. And my heart needs to be brought there, because where my heart was going is, oh, this isn't that important. He understands that I need to put this turkey up before, it goes bad. That's not the case. And although I might think that this is unimportant, or I might think, okay, let me just do this real quick and then I'll enter into your Sabbath, my heart was getting lazy. And it's going to happen. But I need to implement things that keep me connected to him and keep me circumcised and disciplined. And the things that I need to be doing are observing his Sabbath, entering into his Sabbath and not making any excuses for other things that I need to do. Having that heart for him. And if I don't feel like I have that heart, if my flesh is starting to deceive me again, that these things are not that important, that I can skim a little, I need to acknowledge it. I need to acknowledge it with him, and I need to ask him to turn my heart, and he will, because I was feeling that last night. That was one of the things that I was feeling as he was dealing with me, and I was, talking with him was, my heart, I know that my heart's not in the right place. I know it's not where it needs to be, because I still feel like this isn't that big of a deal. Please bring my heart into loving what you love. Please bring my heart into that place where I care, and I'm not just going through the motions of physical obedience, but I'm really rending my heart to what matters to you. The other thing that we need to do is we need to be in the habit of regular fasting. And I love it when I'm talking with people who do their first fast. And then when they contact me and they talk about the first fast, they're already planning their next fast, because it was such an incredible and powerful experience. And God is convicting them that this is something that needs to happen on a regular basis. It's something that they need to continue to get deeper and deeper with him. And that is how we get deeper with him. Fasting is also a way that we are circumcising from the sinful flesh and disciplining the physical flesh. and we should be getting deeper and deeper and deeper with him. And as I'm looking at this, I am also convicted that I have been sliding away from that as well. So here's the thing. It's not that when I'm talking about distraction and I'm talking about my sin, sometimes it can seem like, my goodness, are you even growing? You're talking about the same sins. And I completely understand that. I want you to know I'm always on this upward trajectory. That is something that I'm always checking in with. And I also am continuing to be in this state, to be in this condition. And so those themes are going to still come up, but they're going to be, like I said, distraction looks very different for me now than it did a year ago. The other thing is that God is also moving me, and that is a critical piece. If you're not being moved by God, there are two things that you need to do. One, you need to pray that he does move you and that he does keep you in his fold. And two, you need to make sure that you're listening. And actually, I'm going to add a 3 to that. You need to pay attention to the ways that he's afflicting you and understand that he's doing that and receive why he's doing it. And this is part of the problem with calling these things diagnoses and conditions and, whatever other syndromes and labels we have for things. COVID, Alzheimer's. These are not what medicine tells us they are. God is doing something, and we need to understand that. I uploaded a video yesterday regarding separating the clean from the unclean. When things were going on with the Israelites, like they had a rash, they didn't have all of these like diagnoses that we have. They just understood that God had sent it, and that when God sends this, you see that rash, which a rash doesn't seem like that big of a deal, right? You see that rash, you go to the priest, he looks at it, he takes down what's going on, you go into isolation for 7 days. Isolation has always been about return to God in the Bible. For example, with Passover, when you put the blood of the lamb, you close your door, you isolate, you rid your house of yeast, representing sin. He is doing something with you, and you are supposed to be returning to him. Now, if the person came out of isolation and they were getting better, they went back into isolation for 7 days to finish up what God started. If they weren't getting better, they were cast outside of the camp, and they had to keep their hair unkempt, and they had to call out unclean, unclean. Why? Why did they have to do that? Why were they cast away from their people? Because Israel was to be kept clean. It was not to be defiled. They were to purge the evil from Israel. And that was an indication that that person's heart was not returning to God. And we want to justify ourselves. Our flesh wants to justify us. So if God is dealing with us in this way, we need to go into isolation. We need to recognize that he is doing something with us, that we are being kept isolated from everyone else. We're contagious, right? There's 2 parts of that contagion. One is that we're not to have anything to do with those who are contagious, or we're not to have anything to do with those who are unclean. And if we are the ones who are unclean, we need to go and isolate ourselves, keeping others from being affected by us and doing the work that we need to do with God. That's how we need to be looking at it. And this is why it grieves me so much that those, I'm investing in, certain people that I'm working with, and they're still speaking this language, which tells me that they have no understanding. They have not brought their hearts into understanding. And especially if it's someone who's working for me, who's using the language of the world, I can't have that, because I can't have God's ministry being defiled by someone who does not believe. Another way of saying that is I will not join with someone who does not believe, with whom I am not in agreement. So last night, God literally had me on my knees, because there are things that he was showing me that I've gotten far from. Regular practices that I was engaging in that I'm slowly stepping away from, or that I'm getting lackadaisical about. So there's this mutual covenant, right? There's this mutual relationship in which he's moving me with the shepherd's rod. He is disciplining me. He is doing something, and I'm receiving it. I'm rending my heart to what he's doing. I'm being changed. I'm receiving his rebuke and I'm recognizing his rebuke. And that's part of what I'm trying to teach you right now is any little thing. God did not have to bring me into all of those symptoms last night. The reason he brought me into those symptoms is because of me, because I was not receiving his smaller, more gentle rebukes. Also, I prayed about the smaller, more gentler rebukes. As I mentioned to you, there was something going on with my dog, and he's been putting it on my heart to understand a little bit more about how our children, our animals, and those who depend on us, who are spiritually dependent on us. Because really, if you're physically dependent on a human being, you're most likely spiritually dependent on them as well. And so these people and animals are going to be affected by what we're doing. They're going to be affected by sins. They're going to be affected by rebuke and curses. And so this is something that I was praying about because my dog was afflicted and it was grieving me. And I prayed and asked God, please teach me, how is it that those who are dependent on us are affected? And I think I even prayed, if you have to afflict me to teach me this, go ahead. I know that was in my heart. I had a feeling that he was going to need to afflict me in order for me to learn it. But it's important to me that I understand what he's doing, how he works, what his pattern is, what his heart is. And it's important to me that I allow myself to be an offering for that. And I believe that I have better understanding now about how that works. And I'll tell you another thing is that my dog's affliction is remitting as my affliction is remitting right now as I'm returning to him and I'm not distracting and I'm entering into fasting and isolation. There's a direct correlation. So last night, part of my process right now, and I'll probably be sharing whatever process he has me in, but where I'm at right now is that he had me on my knees last night. I mean, it was so difficult. I was in so much pain that it was hard for me to even lay down. You know, I have a heat pad on. I've got a pillow under my legs. I have a pillow between my legs. I just could not get comfortable. So I had to kind of get up and walk around and shake it out. And, he brought me to my knees and he started convicting me of the things that I used to do and that I need to return to. And he had me renewing my covenant with him, setting up structures with my technology, putting my computer in the cupboard so that it's not readily available for me to distract myself. I need to get back into that posture of being in him and with him and circumcised to him and disciplined to him all day long. A while ago, I posted a video about keeping my head down, and that was something that he had me doing last night too, is keeping my head down. And occasionally he'll do that with me where he'll tell me, keep your head down. And part of what he's showing me is to not look around at the other distractions, that I need to get isolated in him. And so this is something that he does with me ever so often. So there's a combination of what's gone on here is that I have started to get far, but also concurrently, God is bringing me in deeper than I've been before. So he's going to do this. If we're in him, he's going to keep bringing us in deeper. It's not just when we start to step away. It's also that we need to continue to be on an upward trajectory of change, that we need to be getting deeper and deeper into him. There is no such thing as complacency or stagnance or graduating to or arriving at some place where we don't need to continue to do this. You understand that he commands us to be holy as he is holy. We could be here for eternity trying to do that. So there's always going to be work that needs to happen in our hearts in order to get deeper into him and deeper into him. And what that's going to look like in our lives is that we are continuing to discipline. We always need to be in a state of discipline and circumcision. We always need to be living in the place where God is, in our heart, and spirit, living by his spirit. So if you're wondering why this distraction thing is still a problem with you, when you're going to heal from it, when is this going to go away, welcome to the club. We're all in this condition, and I'm glad that you are concerned about it. And now you got to do what God has commanded: discipline and circumcise, always observing his Sabbaths and engaging in regular fasting. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.